Hi everyone, Tarran Deane here from Corporate Cinderella Leadership Development Company, and I'm joined by the sensational Sandra Dumas. So Sandra and I have known each other for 10 years, and Sandra was the first Indigenous woman in New South Wales to become a pastor through Australian Christian churches. That must have felt pretty darn special.
Certainly was. It was, an exciting time. So I've now had my full ordination for just over a year, almost 2 years. Before that, I was on a probationary minister's credential, and yes, the first Aboriginal woman to receive her credential in New South Wales. In the audience that day when I received I didn't realise there were a number of Aboriginal women that were there.
Oh, really?
And one of the ministers came up to me and said to me, "You don't know what you've done." And I went, "What have I done?" And he went, "I've got ladies from my area who are here, who are looking to you as a lady who is paving the way, who's setting," and I was like, pretty honoured. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? When you pursue a goal or a vision that you believe is firmly embedded in your heart, and for you and I as women of faith, there is something about that mantle that you can't set aside, but it's realising it's not even about us. In the fulfilment of that vision, it's not even about us. It's about everyone else that's watching our story unfold.
Exactly.
That's so great. Thank you for agreeing to have this conversation with me today. So in the news recently has been a conversation that tends to come up every January, particularly here in Australia and for our Torres Strait Islander community and friends. And that's around the significance of Australia Day. So I wanted to ask you, as a family friend and also as a proud Aboriginal woman from the Bundjulung country, which is near Australia's most easterly point, if you're not familiar with the Tweed Heads area, do you celebrate Australia Day as a long weekend celebration with your family?
It's a big question with lots and lots of answers, and straight up, do we celebrate Australia Day? We have done, but in a family sense, so in a cultural sense, where we're coming together as a family, celebrating who we are as First Nation people. We have done with our church folk, where it's been a family event, where we went down to a local swimming hole where lots and lots of people get, and lots of activities happening, and we partook of part of the day. But we all, on that day, as a church group, we were specific in saying, hey, we're here too. And there was lots of Indigenous people that are in our church. So we put up an Indigenous flag, an Australian flag, so an Aboriginal flag, an Australian flag, and a Torres Strait Islander flag. And we've joined in with the rest of the celebrations, with the water activities. We got lots and lots of great comments on how we were just a part of them as well on that day of community. So it was a brilliant day of celebration. I think where it comes undone is when it's not inclusive. So my opinion of the date, change the date, is divided in lots of ways, but it must be, and it must acknowledge past so that we can move together forward. And in saying that, acknowledging past wasn't all good, but it's saying you were there, you were part of history, you are part of history, you are our history, but together we're going to make this nation great. So it needs to be an inclusive day. I remember watching a video many years ago where it was back in the 70s when it was Australia Day was first coming into existence, where they were celebrating Australia Day. And the story was from an Indigenous perspective, but how some tribal people were taken from remote areas, brought into the city, into Sydney, and were placed in cells because they were going to be they were forced to be a part of the Australia Day celebration.
As in the television commercial or the actual
reenactment? The reenactment when the first fleet came. So, but they were placed in cells overnight to make sure they weren't going anywhere, and they were forced into reenacting the first Aboriginal people contact on the beach. That's not how we should celebrate.
Yeah.
There should never be anything forced. This is a day of celebration for all of us. Our culture is very much a part of your culture,
Yeah.
and we want you to learn that as well.
Yeah.
And we want to be a part of the nation as a whole.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So if I can pull on a thread of
Yep.
that conversation, because you and I know that I grew up in country New South Wales. I don't identify as Indigenous. I'm Anglo-Saxon. My parents on both sides have lineage back to the convict ships. So we, as a heritage, didn't come voluntarily to Australia, but yet it's become our home. And I don't know what generation I am now, having been born in country New South Wales, grown up with a bunch of family and some good friends from across the railway line that went to primary school with me. So I had a lot of mates that were Aboriginal friends. But I know that even good, well-meaning people can actually develop a bias, conscious or unconscious. So when I think of that piece, that story you just shared of 1970s, and then you mention about these Indigenous Aboriginal people coming from Central Australia.
I think so.
Yeah, coming out and actually being held to fulfil a role. It's something that was done against their will that can't even be explained as well-intentioned, because if someone's taken against their will, that's a trafficking, that's a slavery, that's wrong, that's kidnapping.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that piece of history occurred. So if I park the 1970s and I come forward to the 1990s and even the early 2000s, where we saw the rise of cultural diversity and the Australia Day Lamb campaign that sought to demystify the cultural layers that exist within Australia now, both our First Nation people and then those that have come through convict settlement, migration, or even refugee status, or those that have come in on employment visas, for example. So here we are now, 2019, and we're a hotbed of diversity in this country. So how do you see changing the date as something that comes up in conversation each year? Do you see personally, would you feel personally as an Aboriginal woman that changing the date would have deep meaning and it would be something that would be separate to, say, NAIDOC celebrations? What's the distinction there, I guess I'm seeking?
I suppose when you look at Australia Day, they're celebrating when Australia supposedly was discovered as a nation. With that comes the atrocities then that happened for my people. So changing the date for a lot of people is significant in saying that was a day of sorrow. Why would you celebrate on such a day? But for me, so like I said, I don't know which way the debate, as in changing the date or how we do this together, but it's got to be together. And we've got to acknowledge the past.
So what does acknowledgement look like? If our federal government
Yep.
has previously apologised for stolen generations, what does doing it together and acknowledging the past look like? Is it a symbolic action of drawing a line in our history that rather than celebrate the landing of the First Fleet, that we actually acknowledge the day, say January 1st, when we became a federation? Is that the better move, given that we have NAIDOC celebrations here, which you and I have spoken about, was a rise for justice? Because is any action really going to reduce the depth of emotion that goes with the arrival of the First Fleet?
No, It probably won't. It probably won't. And that could be the Day of Federation. Could be a way forward. There is so much attached to when I talk about acknowledgement. What does acknowledgement look like? It still needs to be a constitutional change.
Right.
It still hasn't happened.
Yep.
And the whole Recognise campaign that took 2 years of a committee travelling out nationwide, asking Indigenous Australians what they want, and then to deliver what was expected and what was wanted, and then to be totally shut down, was, you're looking at a third parliament. No, they weren't. They were looking at an advisory committee that would advise the politicians on Indigenous Australian issues, instead of placing another person over them again. Another
hierarchy.
Another manager. That's what it looks like to Indigenous Australia. So they weren't listened to again. So it's still, Constitution still hasn't changed. So we need this step back. We need to look at why there is so much emotion around, because things still haven't been rectified yet in our nation. Things still haven't been fixed up. Whether, I don't know, a treaty, what needs to happen, but it needs to come back so that we can move forward together.
So it sounds as if this is a deeper story, and I use respectfully the word exercise. This is a deeper exercise of stretching and addressing historical shortcomings that is greater than Australia Day as a long weekend.
Yes.
Because I would dare to say that for a large majority of Australians, they celebrate Australia Day as the last long weekend in January before the kids go back to school.
Yeah.
And it's through the significance of what it means to Aboriginal Australians and folks like me that have great relationships with many in the Aboriginal community who go, oh, hang on, this still doesn't feel quite right, that the conversation ignites again. So I don't know that changing the date will solve that.
No. Yep.
I think this is a continuing conversation that will probably go on beyond our generations.
Yes. Yeah.
Knowing that it's only 60 years ago, for example, in Queensland's constitutional documents, that Aboriginal Australians were not regarded under the international human rights, and locally, I was stunned when I did my first cultural awareness training many years ago with a former Broncos player called Shane Duffy, 100 years ago it must seem, and I learnt this fact that Aboriginal Australians were identified under the Flora and Fauna Act.
That's right.
I was gutted, and I can feel a deep sense of grief because it's ignorance. And how do you educate ignorance unless there is trust? And how do you build trust unless there's relationship? And how do you develop relationship unless there's a coming together and having conversation?
Exactly.
So when you and I first met 10 years ago, and I shared this story with you recently, that I went around to a friend's of ours place, and obviously I'm 5'11" white girl, and I go to a friend's place, and having grown up in country New South Wales, across the railway line was our Aboriginal community and mission, and I had subconsciously thought that people were struggling. And so when I turned up at our friend's place, it was almost an out-of-body experience. I observed myself going, oh, good, they're not struggling. And so it was almost a positive bias from a caring perspective, but yet it was still a bias.
Yeah, yeah.
And we often have folks come along to church on Sunday, some great Aboriginal friends, and one of the guys was sharing how recently, remember that pastor, he was driving a fancy car, and he'd always believed God that he would never be without transport, and he worked hard and done a whole bunch of things, but he named the elephant in the room that went, yeah, you see me driving that car, and you're going, what's that black fella driving that car? And it's great, I think, if we're able to name the elephant in the room like we're doing today and having a conversation that's just maybe not coming up with answers, but just making it possible for you to talk about this stuff, in a real way amongst your community and your friends and around your picnic table, whatever season you gather in, whether it's Australia Day or other, then I think we're going a long way to building relationship, establishing trust, and unpicking some of the fabric of wrongdoing. Let's talk for a moment, if we can, about NAIDOC. Can you share with me and those that are engaged in the conversation with us, what is NAIDOC? How long does it go for? When did it begin? How did it begin? That sort of thing. Can you share about that for us?
Yeah. NAIDOC is a national day of celebration that was birthed out of the movement, out of the justice movement, by a minister of religion called William Cooper, who was rising as a minister, but as a leader in his community down in Victoria, and realised that what his counterparts could do, he couldn't do. And so he engaged the church to say, hey, this is not right. These things that are happening in our communities, in our cities, is not right. And the church stood with him. So it first began in the 1930s, 1940s as a day of mourning, where they started to say these things where the kids were being taken, where you get paid one wage, I get paid another wage because of the colour of my skin. These things aren't right. And so as the church stood with him, this became a movement, and NAIDOC was birthed out of that. And so it's a week-long celebration now, National Aboriginal Islander Day of Celebration, or something. Commemoration, that's the word. And so it's a week-long celebration where we celebrate the efforts and the works of Indigenous people in our nation, and they theme it every year, and each theme goes along with what's happening in our communities, in our society, and it's brilliant. It's a great way for not just Indigenous people, but for non-Indigenous people to understand this nation and the diversity of this nation.
So how can businesses and corporations and banks and schools get behind the NAIDOC message, which raises awareness of commemoration? How can they get behind that?
Celebrate with us, be a part of, sponsor, be involved in your community events. Every community has the week-long events in different formats. Like here in the Tweed, we have a national sports day. They have a day with Hall of Fame where they celebrate the elders who have gone on before us in our community. They have a ball. And the ball, often our police get involved with our ball here. So we've got great working relationships here in our community. But it's a great way for organisations to be involved.
That's excellent. It's good to know too, because I know, we're actually filming this at Gangala, and Gangala is spelled Ganggalah, a place of learning and wisdom. Or as one elder said to me a couple of years ago, it also is a verb and it means now listen. Now listen. So now listen. So here at Gangala, you and Pastor Will, your husband, are senior pastors of the church. What else takes place under the Gangala umbrella?
So we also have a training arm, and under that we have studies where people can come and study. We're linked up to an RTO, so the majority of them are biblical studies, so for people going on into ministry. But there's also leadership programs that we have tapped into as well. We've got a school program happening here at the moment, which is coming alongside working with our state schools, where we're trying to keep our kids into school. And then we have our Aboriginal arm, which is our Aboriginal arts. So we promote the arts. Again, this is it's a great, where it's passing on stories, it's passing on knowledge. We love our history in the area here, and we've got lots of sites in our area in the Tweed, and we're hoping to develop that even further.
That's very cool. And you and Pastor Will also serve on the National Executive for ACC. Representing the Aboriginal
Indigenous Initiative.
Can I ask you one question? What do you prefer? Do you prefer Indigenous or Aboriginal? when people refer to you are a such and such woman, do you prefer Aboriginal woman or Indigenous woman, or does it mean the same thing to you?
For me, it doesn't matter, but then there's others who would prefer, no, I am Aboriginal, I am not Indigenous. Indigenous just takes in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, so Indigenous takes in all people, and probably some of the South Sea Islander, because we do have a mix here in the Tweed of South Sea Islander people as well. But they will let you know, no, I am South Sea Islander as well.
Yeah, so there's a strong cultural identity even within that. And there's some other learnings that I got from that time with Shane Duffy sitting in on that cultural awareness training that some of you may not be aware of. But I read that there's something like 256 different Aboriginal nations around Australia. And hence why when some of the folks were brought into mission areas, they were actually brought in from different nations, some of whom that just didn't get on, and so there was a whole lot of conflict and so forth that took place. But what's one of the things that Gungala is seeking to do to help in this area and beyond to spread awareness of Australia's strong, rich, beautiful Aboriginal culture? I know July you have an initiative that takes place. Can you tell me about that? So our Arnhem Land.
Yes, yep. Okay, so we every year we take a group of people, and our biggest group was last year, which was 47 people, to Arnhem Land. And it's not just a tour. It's not come and see, take a picture with an Aboriginal person. This is getting involved in community life, very much forming relationships with people that they probably would never have formed relationships with, and see that they're everyday people, may live a little bit different and different in the area of remoteness, and then, but why community is the way it is. Some of these communities, like you just said earlier on, have been placed there out of their control. There was a series just not long ago on NITV about a place called Ramingenning. It's in Northern Territory, in Arnhem Land, and clan groups were brought together and placed in this community. No work, no employment, no nothing. They were one shop, and it's quite a big community. And so they on their benefits, because there's no work, the one shop then gets all of the income.
It's a monopoly.
It is, very much.
And would any other society allow a monopoly to happen?
No, there would be outrage. So this happens, and so when we take folk in who have not been open to Indigenous, why things are the way they are. Why do they have to? They get to see firsthand why things are the way they are, because they were forced into patterns of lifestyles that they did not put themselves into, that they never lived in, but now have been modernised, traditionalised into this form of living. And so welfare is very much a part of that. Yeah.
So what do you see as the way forward for us? So you and I have a shared belief system. We're both faith-based people. And so God unites us. What do you see as the opportunity or the pathway for reconciliation? How can community come together?
When arrogance is laid down, ignorance is laid down, and where we're educated together and we look for solutions together. That's the only way forward. And where we see communities that are being done hard by, we've got to stand together and go, this is not right.
This is an injustice.
This is an injustice. Let's make the change that's needed. Let's get the politicians on board that need to get involved here, and let's make the changes that need to happen. But it needs to be together. The Indigenous voice alone can't do it. It needs to be black and white together in this nation.
Sound words. And I remember something that Pastor Will said when Dave and I, my husband Dave and I, first came along to Gungala, that he said everyone has prejudice. So even Aboriginal people may well have prejudice against white Australians, Anglos, or people of other cultural backgrounds. And I think that's true in every nation around the planet. So it comes back to being able to understand, I believe, what each other stands for, and being able to have that conversation without giving into fear, without giving into fight or flight, but having the dignity of a conversation that dares to run alongside each other and says, tell me what you stand for, what matters to you. Conversations like this. So any closing remarks?
It is this, the theme of this year for Gangala is a Bundjulung word called Garabu, and Garabu means together. That's the only way forward. That's the message today. Whether it be Australia Day, whether it be NAIDOC Day, whether it be why this and why that, it's together. We need to do this together to make the changes that are necessary in our nation, and that will put aside race, hierarchy. It will set aside and together. It's the way forward. Garabu.
Garabu.
That's the one.
Perfect note to end this interview. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Love your work.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone. You can follow Gangala on Facebook or check out the website gangala.com. GANGGALAH.com. Tarran and Sandra, over and out.
Thank you. Very good.